after lunch.
You never get too old.
You don't.
So
They're kind of trash, that's all.
what she got up there?
Sometimes we'll get them for the grandkids, and I'll sneak them out.
Oh,
What is that?
She's been kind of like
I miss it.
Yes. All the kids cereal. Oh, why is this happening? Nothing sounds good.
Can't try the beers. No.
Man, this is just not fair, is it? Eat a big Saturday lunch and then have to go and listen to somebody talk to you? Ugh. Well, thank you for coming back. All right, are we almost here? We still waiting? All right, so... All right, you all ready? You all have been good so far. Thank you for that. Thank you for the meal. It was very good. Except for the session on doing marriage God's way, this one is the most important for Tina and me. And that is to learn the process of fulfilling each other's needs. But we'll have a little fun. Kyle's favorite. You all are asleep. It took you way too long. So, communicating and fulfilling each other's needs. In marriage, if we don't work and be intentional and proactive in fulfilling each other's needs, then the way we try to fulfill needs is by doing for the other one what we want them to do for us. Doesn't matter if we're talking sexually, it doesn't matter if we're talking emotionally, even spiritually. And males and females are very different. People are very different. Personality types involve people being very different. And so this whole matter of becoming good at learning to fulfill each other's needs is really, really important. And here's an example. Women, do you ever feel like that? Men, do you ever feel like that? Maybe if I show out, that will help. That represents a lot of things, doesn't it? You wonder where their parents were. I guess one of them was filming, yeah. Right. All right, so when it comes to fulfilling needs, those needs are a moving target, aren't they? What we need changes over time. How many of us were exactly like what we were when we were dating? We all change and our needs change. Therefore, if my philosophy for having a great marriage is to marry somebody who is always everything I want, the person that fulfills my needs in every phase of life, then this whole concept of the moving target makes that extremely difficult. However, if I give myself to meeting the needs of my spouse and working to have a great marriage in that way, then the concept of it is more blessed to give than to receive changes everything. I remember as a little boy hearing my dad preach growing up, and I remember I remember the first time I can envision in my mind hearing my dad say, marriage is more about being the right person than finding the right person. We were living in McEwen, Tennessee, and we left there when I was in the second grade. But I remember him saying that. And I remember thinking, that sounds kind of cliche-ish. And I don't know as a second grader that I had that word in my vocabulary. But I remember thinking, that sounds good. But he was exactly right. And this whole concept of being the right person truly does matter. And if you go back to what I asked you to do earlier, when I said, think of the marriage that you know that's the best marriage or that wow marriage. And when I ask you to think about what made them that way, I almost guarantee you imagined a couple who are so unselfish, who give themselves for taking care of each other. They give themselves up for each other. And that's what we're talking about. They are being the special person for each other. And it is a matter of respect and appreciation. And more simply put, it's what we did when we first started dating, when we were trying so hard to impress them, to please them, to make them happy. And you remember how exciting that was and how fulfilling it was. And in starting with what God has to say, I like the golden rule in using Mother's version, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And from Acts 20 and verse 35, in everything I did, I showed you that by the kind of hard work we must do to help the weak, we remember the words of Jesus when he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, this is a concept that we all know is true, but we have to remind ourselves because our human nature is to get all we can get, is to look for ways we can benefit from others. And especially for some people, it is with every situation, what can I do to personally benefit? However, if we stop and think about it, the concept of it is better to give than to receive is very true. And for most of us, we're old enough to understand this with this illustration. We've got 3 grandkids now, but even when our children were at home, and even as they got older, many years ago, Tina and I got to the point where we looked so forward to Christmas. Not because of what others would give to us, but when we had that perfect gift, we couldn't wait to see them open it and their eyes light up. You know that feeling, don't you? Several of you are nodding. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, and even now, when the kids come, there's kind of this game that we play because every Christmas, Carter or Allison or Haley or will say to us, we want Nano and Papa to open their gifts first. And we are going, oh no, we don't want to open our gifts first. We want to see Walter and Everett and Charlie open their gifts. Why? Because we have worked so hard to find the perfect gifts for our grandkids and children and in-laws, that we want to see their face light up. And I don't care how good the gifts are that they give to us, the bigger part of that is what we give to them. You with me? It's true, isn't it? Why? It is more blessed to give than to receive. And in marriage, we are much more fulfilled when we spend the day looking for ways to do for our spouse than when we spend the day looking for what they can do for us. We sleep better at night. We have more fulfillment. And I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I'll go ahead and tell you where we're going with this. In the counseling room, when I can get a husband and wife to give themselves up for the other one, and when I can get both of them to do that through a needs list process, both of them get what they want and need. It is more blessed to give than to receive. We'll continue to talk about this. So, what we're talking about is unselfish love. Total, complete, unselfish love. Now, I'll be a good Church of Christ speaker and start with verse 25 and verse 28. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. It's a great verse. I'm not downplaying that at all. Verse 28, wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord. That's where we always start, isn't it? But I'm going to challenge you from this point forward that we go to verse 21 either first or last, because we leave out verse 21 when we preach on marriage from Ephesians 5. But what Paul said first is, submit yourselves one to another. And see, we see the submission part, and we have even taught the submission part as the wife is to submit to the husband. No, the husband is also to submit to the wife. And in fact, when Carter and Allison married in Huntsville and I performed their ceremony, it was at Mayfair, big church in Huntsville, a lot of people there. And when I began, one of the first things I said was, Allison, you are to submit unto Carter. And everybody was clapping and yes, you know, they weren't. But it was kind of like that's what would happen. And then I looked at Carter and I said, Carter, you are to submit to Allison. And I quoted Ephesians 5:21. And then I said, Carter, that does not take away the fact that you're to be the head of your household, but I see that as a responsibility, not a privilege. I don't think Ephesians 5:21 was talking out of the context of the husband and wife relationship. Even though Ephesians 5, Paul tells us, is really about Christ and the church. But I believe in order for marriage to be what God wants it to be, that we as husbands and wives are to give ourselves up for the other one. And again, when we both do that, both of us get what we want. Now, we've talked about troubled marriages. Troubled marriages result in scorekeeping. They result in I will if you will. And when couples come into the counseling room and all the baggage has built up, they are at the place where, well, I'm not going to do for her because look at how she's treating me. Or, well, I'll do for him if he will do this for me. Well, that's what happens when you get into a bad place and you start looking at the other one under a magnifying glass and you start keeping score. And what I tell those couples after we go through a needs list process that I'm about to tell you about, I tell those couples, all right, I want you to spend 2 weeks not keeping score. I want you to spend 2 weeks not having the attitude, I will if you will. I ask you to spend 2 weeks giving yourself only to taking care of the needs of the other one. And then in 2 weeks you come back and we'll talk about the process and how the last 2 weeks have been. And if the two of them can do that every time, if the two of them do that, every time they come back and they say, it's been the best 2 weeks we've had, sometimes in years. Why? Because this concept of submitting one to the other. Troubled marriages have the what can you do for me or what you're not doing for me. Now, let me also say this. It's not at all unusual for me to have a spouse, usually a woman, to call and say, can I come to you for marriage counseling? And I say to her, it's hard to do marriage counseling only with one spouse. But oftentimes she will say, I just need somebody to talk to. Can I come talk to you? And I say, sure. And oftentimes, after learning of the situation, what I will tell her is, many times you can win a spouse back by being everything he or she needs you to be. And the reason for that is, it is hard to not treat somebody like a king who continues to treat you like a queen. It's hard to ignore over and over and over again somebody that unselfishly gives themselves up for you. And the reason I put that at this point in this presentation is, a lot of times in a seminar like this, I'll have somebody, a lot of times I'll have a wife and a husband, you can kind of see it in their face. I hadn't seen that with you all yet. Hope I don't. But I'll see where the wife is wanting so badly to have a good marriage, and the husband's there out of guilt or because he was made to be or whatever. And if that's your case today, what I will say to you is, all right, this point's for you. Win them back instead of doing the score-keeping thing. So, when both are committed to meeting the needs of one another, both love each other for who they are, what they do out of love for the other, and it is self-perpetuating. It feeds itself. The challenge is to get it started. So, I want to ask you to think about this matter of, again, when you dated, what was your focus? When you dated, it was not, oh, what can they do for me? It was, how can I impress her? How can I impress him? What can I do to make her love me more, to satisfy her, to make her realize that she can love me? What can he or she do for me, or what can I best do to impress her or him? And of course, it was B, not A. Was it an easy mindset to have? Yeah, it was. We didn't have to work hard to try to be that person. And so why can we not do it now? Well, the answer is we can. So, the exercise you all are going to start in just a few minutes is to put together a needs list. And you have a little longer to work on this. And the needs list process just works. Now, I realize that based on personality type, this is something that some people will jump all over, and some people are just not geared that way. It's kind of like some people like goal setting and assessment, and some people just don't like that. I get it. But I'm going to give you a different version even if you're of that mindset. So the tool is what we call a needs list. It's not based on Harley's His Needs, Her Needs book. Quite frankly, it's based on something Tina and I started doing in 2005 when we realized we were in a place of coexistence and we needed to do better. And I went to her one night and I said, what do you need from me that I'm not doing for you? Or what do you need that I need to do better? And she kind of looked at me like, who are you and what did you do with my husband? And so I said, give me 5 things. And so she started talking, and I got my legal pad out and I wrote them down. And when we got through, she said, so what do you need from me? And so I said, well, it's really important to me for you to do this, and it would be nice for you to emphasize this. And then I told her, next Sunday night, a week later, I want you to grade me on how well I did these 5 things. Now you're thinking, man, these people are weird, aren't they? It was just that we were in that place of coexistence. And so the next Sunday night, I said, all right, it's time on a scale of 1 to 5, how well have I done with number 1? And we discussed it, and she gave me a grade. And then she said, how well have I done? And then I said, so what do you need from me this week? So we started a needs list process, just trying to pay more attention. And I will tell you that from 2005 until today, we have never gone without a needs list. Now, we don't do them every Sunday night. In fact, embarrassingly, Tina and I, neither one of us could tell you when we did our last one, but both of us could go right to where they are. Tina's needs list is on my chest, and my needs list is in her vanity drawer, right? And the way we use the needs list process now is when we get too busy and we feel like we're drifting, one of us will say, I think it's time for us to redo our needs list. And when we redo our needs list, automatically it pulls us right back together. We have the best week that we've had in a long time because it causes us to focus again. Now, it's not rocket science, but you have to be intentional to do it. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Then we'll talk about it. Tina can help me to answer any questions. And then I'm going to ask each couple to go out and do a needs list. So here's how it works. Each spouse writes down 3 to 5 things, and I do needs lists with almost every couple that I counsel and walk them through the process. Used to do 5. Decided through the years that a lot of times it seems it's easier to focus on 3 things at a time than 5. Kind of depends on what they are. After spending time with each other, writing down what you need from the other, and this is how you'll start. Don't talk about to begin with. Write down the 3 things that you most need from the other one. And then swap papers and talk about what your need is. Explain, clarify, ask questions, do you mean? And in fact, when I'm doing the needs list process with a couple, I'll say, what's your need? And she may say, I need more help around the house. And I'll look at him and I'll say, in your own words, what did she say? And he'll go, oh, well, she's saying she needs me to pick up after myself more. She needs me to run the vacuum cleaner. She needs me to sort the kids' laundry or whatever. And she's sitting there going, oh yeah, he gets it. And and then I'll ask her, is that what you meant? Sometimes she will say, well, that's partly it. What I really meant was, and you know what's happening? Communicating, understanding. They're talking about things in ways different from how we normally talk about them. Because you know how we normally talk about them? We get frustrated, we get aggravated, it builds up, and then here's the way the conversation goes. You never help me around the house anymore. And he goes, I remember 3 months ago on Friday, July the 2nd, I helped July the 2nd, and he feels like he won because she said never, and all he had to do is come up with one time to prove her wrong, and then he walks away going, uh-huh. How good was that conversation? Wasn't very good, was it? But that's the way these conversations happen when we're not proactive and we're reactive. So each discusses the needs. After 7 to 14 days, 1 week or 2, then you sit down and say on a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do? With 1 being low and 5 being high. And if Tina says to me, I would give you a 4, or in the counseling room when a wife or a husband will say, I would give him or her a 4, my question is always the same. What did he do well is what I first ask. And then, what could she have done to have made that a 5? And she says, I loved it I noticed when you All right, well, it was such a nice thing. What's she doing? Patting him on the back. You know what Pavlov and Skinner said about that? If you reinforce behavior by rewarding it, the behavior increases. We do that with dog biscuits and dogs. We ought to be able to do it with people too, right? When we say, oh, I noticed when you were increasing the behavior. Makes a lot of sense. And it is discussion without you never, why don't you, I don't know why you're not more like, when things are built up and built up and built up. And then you don't stop, you keep it going. Now, that's the difficult thing. And in fact, the first difficult thing is you'll take the time and do the needs list, but you'll not grade each other. And when you don't grade each other or talk about it, then what you're doing is let it die. The grading part is the most important part because that's where you get the feedback, that's where you understand each other better, that's where you focus on what really matters. And it happens. Truly happens. Well, all right, so what are we talking about with needs list items? Needs lists have to be behavioral. They have to be something the other one can do. They cannot or don't need to be attitudinal or feelings. Why? We can't always change the way we feel by trying harder, but we can change how we act. Perfect example, got a couple in the counseling room. One of them has had an inappropriate relationship. One of them, when we're doing needs lists, will say, I just need her to trust me, or I need him to trust me. And I'm sitting there going, she can't trust you just by trying harder. It's not the way that works. Now, we can turn that into behavioral needs, like, all right, I need you to let me know when you're coming home late from work, or I need you to call me, or I need to be able to call you when I'm worried, when something doesn't seem right without you becoming upset with me. Those are behavioral. And so most feeling and thinking needs can be tied to a behavior. But make sure that your needs involve things the other one can do that you want them to do, because it's not always possible to do other. Number 2, cannot be feelings and emotions. Number 3, if you're having trouble, think of it as a wish list. Now, here's the, in fact, Haley, I'm going to pick on you. I'm scaring you right now, aren't I? Haley is the one in this group that right now is probably going to have the hardest time putting together a needs list. And the reason for that, if she's normal, is because young mothers have so become givers and taking care of everybody else. They've kind of lost themselves in the process. And if you ask a young mother, what do you need? They oftentimes will say, I don't have a clue. Did you have any of that? Or did you have 10 automatically real quick? That's it. And it's all because of how life has programmed you. But see, here's the problem with that. If Haley can't come up with what she needs from Michael, how in the wide world of sports is Michael going to take care of her needs? There's a problem there, isn't it? And so Haley needs to dig deep in order to look at what really matters in our relationship. What would make me go, wow? And sometimes the wish list thing, if I had 3, if you had 3 wishes for me to do something, what would it be? All of a sudden, oh, wow, that's easy. It's the spin. It's the different way of looking at it. So if you have trouble, think of it as a wish list. So what are the challenges? The challenges in the needs list process is, well, if I assume that I understand his or her needs and how to fulfill them and we'll need to talk about it, well, that's a problem. Number 2, knowing what my own needs are. Number 3, some of us can communicate. In fact, let me start all over. Some of us can turn our thoughts and feelings into words, and it's just easy. Our vocabulary is such, our practice is such that we can turn thoughts into feelings easy. For some of us, that's the most awkward thing in the world. It's kind of fun to be in a counseling room with a husband and wife where the husband can't do this at all. And I'll say to him sometimes, what you're saying is that you love the way she or you admire her for, and she's sitting there going, oh, if he could only say it that way. You know, and he'll respond by saying, yeah, what he said. And I laugh at that sometimes, but I realize that some of us just have such a hard time, I call it gushing, turning our thoughts and feelings into words, that the needs list process becomes very difficult. Number 4, assuming if it is my need, it's also his or her need. And let me jump off to the physical side. Just real quickly, sexually, the hardest thing in the world for us to talk about is sexual needs. Why? Even if you've been married a long time, being able to sit down and have the discussion, what do you need me to do? What makes you feel good? What do you want? Oh, Christians don't have those conversations, do we? But what happens when we don't have those conversations is, so many times we are unfulfilled in the God-given physical relationship. And if we are unfulfilled, and if we don't talk to each other about what our needs are, then we revert to, well, if I like it, then she must like it too. And if you've not been married long enough now to know males and females are different, especially in that way, we'll be through at 5. I need to spend some time with you. It's true. We realize that. We all are very different. So if we don't talk about our needs, then we are left to guessing. Challenges, sometimes men are sitting here going, oh, I don't think I can do this. Well, just try and see if life doesn't get better. Sometimes we think, well, that's a ridiculous need. Wait a minute. My needs are not what Tina thinks my needs ought to be. They are what I think they are. And her needs are what she thinks they need to be, not what I think they ought to be. And if I catch myself saying, are you sure? That doesn't make sense. Ooh. Seems a little elementary and immature, doesn't it? This is a big one, taking the time to do it. Or are any in here going, we've been married so long, we know each other, we don't have to do that? Well, at this point, we'll try to embarrass you into doing it. So think of it as a wish list. Let us give you some examples, okay? And these are ones that I hear all the time. We encourage couples always to put spiritual encouragement as a need. What does that mean? Different things for different people. Sometimes it means praying together when we have not been doing that. Sometimes it means sending an email with a Bible verse in it. Sometimes it means driving down the road with a spouse saying, look at the beautiful sky that God gave us. Look for ways to be spiritual with each other. We'll talk more about that. Sometimes, as I gave the example earlier, she will say, I just need time to talk about the day and things in general. Oftentimes, she will say, help with the housework. Sometimes she will say back rubs. Oftentimes, she will say, I need you to verbalize or tell me you appreciate me and show praise for something I've done. Help with the children. Just tell me that you love me. Pay attention to me. Ask me out. Date time, quality time without the kids. Oftentimes she will say, I need alone time. And how does she say it? A lot of times we will hear things like, oh, if I could just have 5 minutes on the commode without somebody tugging on me. And the women all laugh because they know exactly what that feels like. She oftentimes will need non-sexual affection. because so many times physical relationship to men just involves sexual affection. Some examples of his needs: spiritual encouragement, sexual, physical needs. Oftentimes, husbands need way more of this than we think they do. Being interested in what I'm interested in, also some alone time, sometimes special meals. And before I go to the watered down version, I'll tell you a story that people always enjoy. I was doing a form of this in a church in West Tennessee, and there was this man that was in his 90s. And after I did the needs list session, in fact, did it on Sunday morning as a part of Sunday morning worship, and then came back that night, and this 90-something-year-old man came up to me, and he called me preacher. I'll never forget that. He said, "Preacher, that needs list thing works." And I said, "Oh, really? Do you want to tell me about it?" And he said, "Yeah, you know what I got this afternoon?" And I thought, "Ooh, I wonder where this is going." And he said, "Yeah, I got a pie." And I said, "You did? Your favorite pie?" He said, "Yeah, man, it was good." Needs list can be special meals or special food. All right, I've locked it up. What did I do? I hit the bottom arrow. Is it? Without meaning to. I think the elders, I think he was scared of what I was going to say, and he cut off the streaming really quick, didn't he? Yeah. So one challenge that I see sometimes when working with couples is sometimes a need he has will be completely in opposite contrast of a need that she will have. And those become tricky. How do you work them out? Sometimes his way, sometimes her way. And we'll talk about differences and compromise later. But let's look at this. So what is the watered down version? If you're sitting here going, "Oh, that's too academic. No, that doesn't work for me," then in your time together, and please don't go to this just because it's easy. You will appreciate if you do the full version. But if you want, simply ask each other, what do I need to work on that's important to you? Or what could I do that would make you go, wow, that's really nice? So remember, the whole assumption today is you're not going to have a better marriage just because you came and heard this. You got to put these things into play. So I want to encourage you to do that. Now, Tina and I have done this so much. It's all, it's kind of easy for us, and we know exactly what we think we said. But what questions do you have about putting together a needs list? Somebody break the ice by asking a question.
Well, and once you write it, like he said, you need to swap papers and make sure you understand what they wrote, and that they understand what you wrote and understand what it means.
Yep.
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. As Crystal and I have worked on these needs lists in the past since attending, when you go and do the review and you talk amongst each other or between the two of you about your needs list, don't be defensive in your reactions to the need that's being expressed. That'll kill the communication, that'll kill it all right there. If you're defensive in defending my action, I should say when you're scoring each other.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I say that all the time. I'll say, so how well did he do? And she'll give him a 3, and he automatically starts saying, do you not remember when he's trying to negotiate for a better score? Or she is. It works both ways. But remember, you're not trying to determine how well you did from your standpoint. It's from their standpoint. And that cliche, perception is bigger than reality. It's kind of the same thing here. I don't care what you think they ought to think. It's what they think that matters, not what I think they ought to think. Does that make sense? What else?
Have you ever come across a situation when they had needs and the other person couldn't fulfill it? Like what you would come to in that?
I want to say
no to that because I pretty strongly feel that there are ways we can make effort to fulfill needs in different ways, even though it's hard. Now all of us are thinking, all right, especially sexually, and I'm not assuming that's where you were coming from. I don't want to do that. But when it comes to sexual needs, first of all, I don't want to do anything at all to encourage anybody to feel forced to do anything. I don't want to do that. There are ways physically to fulfill physical needs without two people feeling exactly the same way in terms of their desires and intensities. And part of the times there's a problem when because of age or having given birth or the change or whatever, that desires are very different. And all of that's extremely important. And I, again, don't want to do anything to encourage anybody, any couple, to feel like they're forcing anything on the other one. But I also don't want to do anything to encourage any of us to think, oh, well, I know he or she has that need, but I don't feel like it, so I don't have to do anything. Now, that gets to be very involved, and I have that situation an awful lot in the counseling room, and we get pretty specific and talk about ways to do that and all of that. But my point in going there is I don't know that I can come up with a way that I don't think we can make effort to fulfill most needs, as long as the expectations and desires are reasonable. Best way I know to answer that. What else?
Feeling and turning it into something concrete. That's not always easy.
No, it's not. First time you do it, it's tough. It's hard. But the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Take a global concept and to get it down to a specific behavior. Like, let's just say clean the house. I mean, that's not necessarily mine, but clean the house to get down to, I need the dishes done on Mondays, or whatever it is. I mean, how do you that's not the only example. I'm just saying, how do you get the global down to a specific on something that's not necessarily specific?
You may have to be specific to begin with. Yes. Remember, this is a process. For example, the grading part is a big part of answering your question. I need help around the house, might be the need. And then 7 days, 14 days later, how well did I do? Well, I loved that I noticed it helped me so much when one thing that I really was hoping you would do was this. And see, when you have conversation like that, it makes it easier to not be defensive. You are being specific. You are saying, hey, it would have been a big deal to me had you done this. And oftentimes in the counseling room, I'll hear him or her say, wow, I didn't even think about that. I didn't realize that mattered. And see, what happens is it makes it easy to not be defensive and to talk and communicate because you're going both ways. You know, I realize if I get defensive with you, you'll get defensive with me. I don't want you to be defensive with me. Or I want to know what you need from me because I want you to know what I need from you. And while that kind of does the giving yourself up for the other one, takes that side out of it, there's an appropriately selfish part of this that, wow, it sure makes me happy when I do for you. Does that make sense? Do you see how I kind of went there? Maybe that helps. What else?
You know, even as you're talking, and I'm trying to process, I mean, I articulate for a living, but I just really struggle with this. And it's not the whole honest thing, and it's not that I'm manly or any of those things. We, much like you and your wife, we do some of this, I feel like, all the time, and we get to that point, and I just feel totally lost. And I don't know if all men feel that way, or maybe that's, you know.
Lost because, so specifically, what's the difficulty?
Just finding specifics that I can relate to her, that
Having a hard time coming up with needs?
in the day I feel like I'm pretty self-contained, honestly. And I don't know if other guys feel that way too.
So one of the reasons Tina and I don't redo our needs list every week is because through the years of trying so hard, and we're not perfect, we frustrate each other and we get on each other's nerves. We're very normal. But in the process of beginning and continuing to be respectful of each other and unselfish with each other, we've kind of gotten to that place where, and help me with this, and I'm struggling a little bit because I don't want this to be about us, and I don't want to look at us thing. But I, in all reality, will tell you, while we don't perfectly fulfill each other's needs, we both feel like our needs are pretty well taken care of, don't we? Now, you know, if you get Tina out here at the side, she'll say when it comes time to wash dishes, I go find a tractor to work on pretty quick. All of that's true. In fact, she's way more unselfish in her taking care of me than I am her. And I'll get
The thing is that we know we don't want to ever hurt each other's feelings. Like that, even if, it's not ever intentional. We may do something that gets on each other's nerves, or I don't know, but it's not intentional. And I think that took a while to get to, but that's, and if I know you didn't intentionally hurt my feelings, or you didn't intentionally do something, that's huge.
Well, and we'll come back to that in a bigger way with the conflict thing. But bringing it back, I think I get what you're saying, but I also will tell you this. It's beneficial for Tina and me to stop and sit down and go, hey, what do I need to do a better job of? You know, what help do you need more of? And if she says the same thing to me, you know, I might say, you know, I'd love it if when I run an errand you would say, hey, let me go with you. That's a good example for us because while it's hard for me to come up with things that she doesn't do there still are things that would make me go, hey, wow, that'd be really nice. You know, we're so busy and we're home, it feels so little that when she gets the opportunity to stay home, she goes, oh, please leave me here. I just want to be at home. And so I don't go, oh, well, you run to the parts place for me while I get a fan belt. But man, it would be neat for her to go, hey, let me go with you. You know, so when you get creative and you really kind of look at it as a wish list or, wow, that would just be nice thing, usually you can come up with something to articulate. Does that help?
I think I can relate to what you're saying. Maybe we're a lot like, and I'll give you this. I'll give you a sports analogy.
I do that.
As we do it, that's how we talk sports analogies. You'll start out shooting 1 for 5, but practice won't make perfect, but you'll shoot a higher percentage. So, you know, just get started in it. And as what Barry was also saying is they've done it long enough. As you get going along in the years to come, you'll shoot a higher score.
Yeah. All right.
Other questions? All right, so I want to give you 30 minutes to do it. We'll go 10 minutes behind, and I promise you I'll make up for it. Take this one seriously. Just please do. I promise you'll be glad you did. So see you back at 2:10. If you have problems, if you're just trying hard and not getting there, come find Tina or me, and we'll sit down and help you figure it out. I do that every day. And we'll be glad to do that with you too if you want to. All right, see you